Zob thought she had it all figured out when it came to God and the afterlife, until a crazy accident flipped everything upside down. Join her as she shares her mind-blowing near-death experience that changed her views on religion and eternity. Hey, I'm Zara Faruqi, and I'm 42. I live in a cozy 2-story house in Lansing, Michigan, where I've spent most of my adult life. Before everything took a turn, I was just your average middle-aged mom, working as a pharmacy tech at the local CVS and juggling life with my 2 teens and my husband, Kareem. I grew up in a pretty religious Muslim family, so my faith was a huge part of my life. I prayed 5 times a day, fasted during Ramadan, and did my best to follow all the teachings I picked up since I was a kid. My parents moved here from Pakistan before I was born, and they made sure we stayed connected to our traditions even while living in America. That winter morning started out like any other. I was bustling around the kitchen, getting breakfast ready for the kids before school, while the news played softly in the background. They were talking about a snowstorm that was supposed to hit later. Carbon monoxide. I remember thinking I really needed to grab some groceries after work. What I didn't realize was that our carbon monoxide detector had been acting up for weeks. The batteries were dead, and somehow both Kareem and I totally forgot to replace them during our usual home upkeep. Turns out our old furnace had a crack in the heat exchanger, slowly leaking that odorless, colorless gas into our house. I started feeling a bit dizzy while I was packing lunches, but I just brushed it off as being tired. My daughter Amira said she had a headache and wanted to skip school, and my son Zane was already upstairs in the shower. Kareem had left early for his job downtown. The dizziness got worse while I was loading the dishwasher. The room started spinning, and my vision got all blurry around the edges. I remember trying to grab my phone to call 911, but my fingers felt all numb and clumsy. The last thing I saw was Amira's scared face as I collapsed onto the kitchen floor. Later, I found out that even though Amira wasn't feeling great herself, she managed to call emergency services. The firefighters showed up in no time and found dangerous levels of carbon monoxide in the house. They got us all out just in the nick of time. Me unconscious, Amira barely able to walk, and Zane who had passed out in the shower. The paramedics told me later that my heart had actually stopped in the ambulance for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I was clinically dead. I felt totally dead, but those minutes stretched on forever, and it completely changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what happens after. Looking back, it's wild to think how my whole life was leading up to that moment. All those years of believing without question, all my ideas about what happens after we die, none of it really prepared me for what I was about to go through. The doctor said I was super lucky. If Amira hadn't made that call when she did, or if the first responders had shown up just a few minutes later, or if the carbon monoxide levels had been even a little bit higher, we wouldn't have made it. But honestly, I now believe it was all meant to happen. What happened next, I had this moment that felt like a divine setup, revealing truths I never saw coming. I used to judge my life based on how well I followed the rules. Was I praying at the right times? Was I dressing modestly enough? Was I a good role model for my kids, showing them what it meant to be a faithful Muslim woman? These thoughts were on my mind all the time, influencing every choice I made. My relationship with Kareem was built around this shared perspective. We met at the Islamic Center of Greater Lansing during a community event, and like my family, his placed a lot of importance on marrying within the faith. We raised our kids with the same values, sending them to weekend Islamic school and making sure they really got the significance of our beliefs. Working at CVS sometimes challenged my faith. I had to deal with prescriptions that clashed with Islamic teachings and serve customers whose lifestyles were totally opposite to what I believed. But I always reminded myself that it wasn't my job to judge. Only Allah could do that. On the morning of my near-death experience, I remember feeling super blessed. Amir had just gotten into Michigan State University with a full scholarship. Zane's grades were finally looking up after a rough start in high school, and Kareem had just gotten a promotion. Everything seemed to be going perfectly, just like I thought it should for a family that followed all the right rules. Looking out my kitchen window that morning, I was looking out my kitchen window and saw the neighbor kids all bundled up, waiting for their school bus in the chilly Michigan weather. Mrs. Peterson next door was shoveling her driveway, and I thought I should send Zane over to help her later. It was just one of those ordinary moments that felt so solid and secure. Little did I know that just a few hours later, everything I thought I knew about life, death, God, and truth was about to get turned upside down. The certainty I had built my life around was about to fall apart like a house of cards in a strong wind. What happened to me? You know, near-death experiences really change people, but what happened to me was on a whole different level. It felt like I was born again, seeing everything with fresh eyes for the first time. The truth I stumbled upon during those 4 minutes and 37 seconds didn't just flip my world upside down. It changed the lives of everyone around me, too. That morning, as I went about my routine, I had no clue that by sunset, I'd have this super important message to share. Something so urgent that I'd dedicate my life to telling anyone who would listen. It was all about what's really waiting for us on the other side, the true nature of God, and the choices we make in this life that echo into eternity. It all started the moment my heart stopped. The moment my heart stopped, everything changed in an instant. It wasn't like those stories where you see a tunnel of light. Nope, it felt more like being thrown into freezing cold water. A total shock that hit me everywhere. Next thing I knew, I was floating above my body in the ambulance. The paramedics were scrambling. Their voices sounded muffled, like I was underwater or something. One guy was doing chest compressions while another was getting the defibrillator ready. I could see myself lying there, pale and lifeless, still in my blue CVS uniform and wearing that silver necklace I got for our anniversary. But the weird part? I wasn't scared at all. It felt more like I was watching a movie about someone else. I started noticing things I wouldn't normally catch, like the young paramedic had a coffee stain on his sleeve, and there was a crack in the ambulance ceiling that looked just like a question mark. Then everything went dark. Not the normal darkness when you close your eyes, but this heavy, alive kind of darkness that felt like it was pressing in on me. I felt myself being pulled deeper into it by some invisible force. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. There was a presence with me, beautiful yet terrifying at the same time. I couldn't see it, but I just knew it was an angel. Not the cute kind with wings and halos from greeting cards, but something ancient and powerful that made my soul shake just being near it. The angel didn't speak with words. Instead, it flooded my mind with images and understanding. I saw my whole life play out. Not just the big moments, but the ripple effects of every choice I'd ever made. Like that time I was unkind to a coworker and how it messed up her whole day. Or the moment I helped an elderly customer with her prescriptions and how that small act of kindness gave her hope when she really needed it. What shocked me most? What really blew my mind was seeing how my commitment to Islam had impacted others. I noticed people I had encouraged to stick to stricter religious practices, thinking I was helping them out. But then the angel showed me that this had actually pushed them further away from the truth, instead of bringing them closer. I wanted to argue and defend my beliefs, but in front of this divine being, all my points felt weak. The angels revealed more scenes from history that I had never learned about. Truths about Muhammad that had been hidden or twisted over time. It was like a light bulb went off in my head. Then the darkness around us started to shift, and I could see other souls moving through it. Thousands, maybe millions. Some were being pulled up toward a light I hadn't noticed before, while others were drifting down, their spiritual forms getting dimmer I hadn't noticed before. So I had this wild experience where an angel showed me that the destination of each soul isn't just random. It actually reflects what they believed and how they lived their lives. I saw Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and folks from other faiths all realizing that their sincere beliefs just weren't enough. The truth was out there for them, but they chose different paths. It was heartbreaking to watch some souls figure out their mistake too late. They were calling out to Allah, their prophets, and various gods, but there was no response. The angel made it clear that there was only one way to reach the light above and one truth that could save a soul from sinking into darkness. Then the angel guided me closer to these souls that were descending, and let me tell you, it was terrifying. Their pain was so intense that it felt like a physical force. I recognized some good people I had known in life, like Brother Karim, who had led prayers at our mosque for decades. There he was, his soul dimming as he fell, still clutching his prayer beads. Sister Fatima, who taught Quran classes to our kids, was right next to him. Their faces showed the same awful realization I was feeling. All our devotion had been misplaced. But then the angel showed me something that broke my heart. Souls of children who had died, including some from my own community. Unlike the adults, these kids were being drawn up toward the light. The angel helped me see that they were innocent, not yet caught up in false beliefs. While this mercy brought me some comfort, it also deepened my sadness, knowing so many parents would never see their children again. Souls of children who died, I started to notice something weird in this space. Some souls were wearing chains made of light, but they weren't physical chains. They were more like beliefs, traditions, and practices that had tied them down in life. I could see my own soul in front of a judge, and I had chains too, glowing with Arabic calligraphy and Islamic symbols. They looked beautiful but heavy, pulling me down. Then the angel took me to what seemed like a huge courtroom, but it was all made of pure light. Souls were appearing before a judge, but I couldn't see the judge directly because the light was too bright and holy. Each soul's life was examined, not just based on what they did, but also on what they chose to believe when the truth was right in front of them. I watched as a woman I recognized from our mosque was shown all the times she met Christian missionaries, all the times she saw churches or heard the gospel message, but just brushed it off. When it was my turn to face judgment, it felt like a witness against her. The truth had been there, but she chose to stick with her familiar beliefs. Then it was my turn. Every time I proudly declared the Shahada, every time I taught my kids that Jesus was just a prophet, every time I dismissed the Bible as corrupted, everything was laid bare. The weight of my mistakes felt crushing. Unlike many souls I'd seen, my judgment wasn't final. I was shown all this for a reason. The angel communicated that I would get a chance to go back and share what I learned. But first, I needed to see more, much more. We started moving toward the light above, and I could feel my chains of false belief beginning to dissolve. As we moved up, the light grew stronger. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It felt like being wrapped in pure love. I began to see what looked like different levels or realms, each one more beautiful than the last. But the angel made it clear that these weren't the multiple heavens I'd been taught about in Islam. Then I saw him, Jesus Christ, but not in the way I had known him from Islamic teachings. He wasn't just a prophet or a good man, he was God himself. His presence was overwhelming, filled with a love so powerful it felt like it might break me. You know, all the lies I used to believe about him just kind of fell away, like leaves in a strong autumn wind. Suddenly, I got the whole Trinity thing. Not three separate gods like I was taught, but one God in three persons. It was this mystery that just clicked for me. It was like trying to explain color to someone who's only ever seen in black and white. You really can't get it until you've experienced it yourself. Then, the angel showed me some real history, not the stuff I learned in school. I saw Jesus' death on the cross, which I had been taught never actually happened, and then his resurrection. I got a glimpse of the early Christian church and how the message spread. But then I also saw how other religions, including Islam, had twisted and distorted these truths. What shook me to my core was learning about the true origins of Islamic teachings. The angel revealed things I had no clue about, showing me how political power and human ambition shaped the religion I had followed so devotedly. The real Muhammad was so different from the perfect prophet I was taught to revere. But the angel wasn't showing me this to put down Muslims. It was more about helping me understand why so many sincere people got led astray. I saw how Satan carefully crafted this deception over centuries, using people's natural desire for structure and rules to steer them away from true salvation. Then, the angel took me to what felt like a huge library, but instead of books, it had people's life stories, everything they did and the paths they could have taken. I saw alternate versions of my own life, like what could have happened if I had accepted the truth sooner. I pictured my kids growing up without the weight of false beliefs, my husband and me leading others to real freedom instead of deeper bondage. But then came the toughest part. I was shown people I had influenced, friends I encouraged to be more devout in Islam, neighbors I invited to the mosque, even my own kids whom I taught to reject Christian beliefs. The angel helped me realize I'd have to answer for this, not just for my own choices, but for how I affected others. But even in the middle of all this heavy stuff, I was also shown hope. I saw how my near-death experience would impact other people. I watched as my future testimony unfolded. I was also shown hope. The angel helped me break free from the same chains that had held me down. I saw Muslims who would hear my story and start questioning their beliefs, beginning their own journey towards the truth. The light got even brighter, and I found myself in what felt like the throne room of heaven. The presence of God was so strong that all my previous ideas of worship seemed like weak imitations. This wasn't the distant, impersonal Allah I prayed to 5 times a day. This was a loving Father who knew me completely and loved me perfectly. In this throne room, I saw souls entering heaven. It completely changed how I understood salvation. These souls weren't getting in just through their own good deeds. Each one had put their faith in Jesus Christ, and their lives showed that faith through the sacraments and good works inspired by the Holy Spirit. I finally got it. Salvation is a gift of grace received through faith, confirmed by the sacraments, and shown through good deeds. The angel then showed me that my religious devotion, which I thought would save me, had actually been a barrier. All my careful following of Islamic law, my ritual prayers, my fasting, those weren't ways to God. They were attempts to earn what could only be given freely through faith in Jesus Christ and participating in his sacrifice. I got to witness some real conversations in heaven. Souls who had just arrived were meeting Jesus face to face. Some of them were former Muslims like me, while others were Hindus, Buddhists, or atheists. What really struck me was how many of them said, "But I was so sure I was right." The love they felt was overwhelming, but for many it was too late. Then the angel took me to see something I never expected: the saints from Christian history. They weren't distant, unapproachable figures. They were alive, vibrant, and completely humble. I saw them worshiping alongside former Muslims who had found the truth during their lives. There was no hierarchy, no special status, just a joint celebration of God's grace. Then came the toughest part to see. I was shown hell, not just as a separation from God, but as a real place of torment. The flames symbolized intense suffering that seemed never-ending. I saw religious leaders being punished. The souls there weren't being tortured by devils with pitchforks. Their torment came from being in a place completely devoid of God's presence. The fire was both real and a representation of their endless anguish. I saw religious leaders I had respected in life, men and women who had led thousands astray. Their suffering was worse because they could see the impact of their teachings. Each soul that arrived because of their influence added to their torment. Yet even in their agony, they acknowledged the justice of their situation. Millions of Muslims earnestly praying. So, there was this moment when an angel showed me something that totally broke my heart. I saw millions of Muslims praying really earnestly, but their prayers felt like they were hitting some sort of brass ceiling. It wasn't that God wasn't listening, it was more about them praying to a twisted idea of God. I realized how Satan was using their genuine sincerity against them, keeping them content with just going through the motions of religion while missing out on true salvation through faith in Jesus. Then I got a glimpse of my own future if I decided to come back to life. I could see myself facing rejection from my Muslim community, struggling with my family, and dealing with accusations of betrayal and mental health issues. But I also saw the lives that could be changed through my story. The angel made it clear that this path wouldn't be easy, but it would matter for eternity. What happened next was tough to explain. I had a choice, stay in heaven or go back to share what I'd learned. The peace and comfort of heaven were incredible, and part of me really wanted to stay. But when I thought about the people who would be touched by my testimony, including my own family, I knew I had to go back. Before sending me back, the angel gave me one last vision. I saw my own judgment day, but this time it was after I had completed my mission on earth. I saw myself standing in front of Jesus, not as a judge, but as my Savior, hearing him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." The joy of that moment was way bigger than any temporary struggles I'd face coming back. When I returned to my body, it felt like I was being squeezed through a tiny tube. My chest hurt from the CPR, and the bright hospital lights were such a shock after the pure light I had just experienced. The first face I saw when I woke up was Kareem, with tears streaming down his cheeks as he held my hand. Our kids were there too, their eyes all red from crying. The doctors told me I was lucky since most people who suffer from carbon monoxide poisoning don't make it, but I knew it wasn't just luck. Once the doctors left, I tried to explain to my family what I had experienced, but Kareem thought it was just confusion from the lack of oxygen. Amir and Zayn exchanged worried looks. Nobody wanted to believe that their devoted Muslim wife and mom was saying these things. The first few weeks at home were really tough. Word spread around our Muslim community quickly, and friends I'd known for ages started ignoring me. The imam even came by, suggesting I might need some psychiatric help. My own parents called from Pakistan, crying and begging me to take back what I said. Kareem was patient at first, thinking it was just a phase, but things changed when I stopped going to the mosque and started attending a local church instead. I got into the sacraments and started doing charitable work inspired by my new faith. He'd find me praying the rosary or reading the Bible, finally understanding verses that had been twisted in my Islamic education. We argued about what to tell the kids, wondering if I was having a mental breakdown. But slowly, something amazing started happening. People began reaching out to me privately, other Muslims who had doubts and their own questions. A friend from my mosque admitted she'd been secretly going to church services and was curious about the sacraments. My daughter Amira started asking questions about what I'd seen, really paying attention to the answers. About 6 months after my experience, I was invited to speak at a small church. I was super nervous, but once I started sharing my story, something shifted. The words just came out, and people started crying, including some Muslims who were just there out of curiosity. That day, 3 people decided to accept Christ, choosing to express their faith through baptism and committing to doing good works. People were crying. So, 2 years later, our place has turned into this unofficial hangout spot every week. People come by with all sorts of questions, former Muslims, skeptics, and folks who've had their own wild experiences. Kareem still hasn't come around to my new faith, but he's definitely softened up a bit. Just last week, I caught him reading the Gospel of John when he thought I was asleep. The death threats have mostly died down, though I still get some nasty messages on social media. But honestly, it doesn't matter. Once you've seen what I've seen and know the truth about eternity, this temporary life doesn't seem so scary anymore. My biggest joy came about 3 months ago when Amir told me she had been secretly praying to Jesus. She had her own moment of experiencing God's love while reading the Bible I gave her. She wants to get involved in the sacraments and live out her faith through acts of kindness. Zane is still trying to figure things out, but he's asking some really good questions. Every night, I thank God for giving me a second chance and letting me help others find the truth. I know my story sounds wild. 2 years ago, I would have been the first to roll my eyes at it, but I can't deny what I saw and what I went through. I can't just stay quiet. Too many souls are at stake. There are so many sincere people out there who are lost, just like I was. If even one person finds the truth through my story, all the stuff I've lost will totally be worth it. If this video spoke to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss another powerful testimony of God's love. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life might change forever.